Hello and welcome, one and all educators and educated. I am Scott Meyer, co-founder of Chipp, and thrilled to be here with Dr. Sabba Quidwai, founder of Designing Schools, who's bringing humanity to the heart of AI. Welcome, Sabba. Great to have you.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. Always love coming and chatting with you.
I know, it's fantastic. Your LinkedIn is my favorite follow, sharing
Oh,
exactly what AI means for educators. I recommend everyone check it out. And that's why we wanted to get together. We've had a lot of conversations about the future of education, what it means for teachers and administrators and students. And I think there's a lot of tools and not as much strategy. And one thing you're doing is not only bringing your experience as an educator, but also going into schools, seeing what they're doing, what they're maybe missing, what they have questions about. And we wanted to just share some of your knowledge, with the broader education community. So if you're up for it, let's do that over the next couple of interviews we have.
yeah, let's do it.
So we should start at the top. When you get a phone call or probably a LinkedIn message from a school, what are they asking you? What's the question that makes them want to reach out and be like, we need help?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of things are curiosity. Right
Mhm.
now, when people reach out, I think there's a lot of things that, there's this really good quote that I like. It's from Clay Shirky, and he's a professor at NYU. And he says, we don't have information overload, we have filter failure. And I think these days there's so much information overload on people who are already extremely overwhelmed with so many other
Right.
pieces that when somebody calls, a lot of times they're trying to make sense of things, trying to piece pieces together. But I would say usually if you're reaching out to me, you're somebody who wants to do things a little bit differently.
Yeah. And doing it differently, I think, is perfect for what we want to talk about today because a lot of people are trying out AI tools, maybe buying stuff, giving it to students or teachers. But I think that idea of AI as like a learning partner or as a team member is maybe missing. So, talk to me a little bit about, when you have those calls, how do you get people to think a little bit more about the mindset or the strategy versus the widget?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's also not a very easy thing to do. That's why I say the people who come to me, they already usually have some of those seeds planted and that they know this is the right thing to do. Let's just frame this up with a couple of things because I do think sometimes when people talk about like tools versus strategies, like we think it's an either or people just assume like, well, you don't like that app or something like that. And like really it has nothing to do with either. It's really stems from this idea and you're a business owner, right? You're a builder in this space. So I feel like you'll really be able to speak to this. But I say that a lot of news and things that's out there around AI is for AI in the current moment, right? And in education, we're a little bit unique in that, yes, your adults need to be trained and things and whatnot for right now. But at the same time, we simultaneously designed for people who are 5, 10, 15, 20, and their education around AI has to be very, very different than like, here's a chatbot, go learn how to use this, because the world that they are walking into is a one in which we can already assume we will have artificial general intelligence, right? Like if you are a high school freshman, if you are an eighth grader in middle school, you can absolutely with a pretty like 90% degree of certainty say these are kids that are walking into a world where machines will be able to do most of the things that humans can do as well. And that's just a really different area that I think we recommend, especially leadership teams, sit in to think about what do kids really need to be successful in that space. And a lot of times people also think that a lot of this is unknown. We have no answers. But history, research, data, like we actually have a lot of pieces about what we know makes learning meaningful, about what gives people purpose, and about the kinds of things that we've always wanted to do, but just haven't been able to. So that's kind of like one piece of it. The other piece of it that I think is important to know, which personally has probably made me more like vocal and opinionated and more confident to kind of say things out loud, is that I feel like AI is a very unforgiving technology. Like the world in general today is very unforgiving because let's say with like iPads, right? If you didn't get it right the first time, second time, or you decided to join in the movement like 5 years later, right? You didn't adopt it in 2011, but oh, the pandemic happened and now we did it in like 2020. Honestly, I don't want to say it was okay, but you weren't punished for it, so to speak. I think
Mm.
today, when you get AI wrong on the first try, you're punished for it later down the line. And I just think that's a mistake that can be avoided because one thing I do appreciate about these AI companies and things that are just happening is there's a lot of transparency. Maybe not in the data set and the kind of ways in which some people might like, but in terms of vision, in terms of what to expect down the line, there is, I think, an overemphasis on, hey, this is what's coming. People like Sesame, for example. Here's our demo. Here's what we're working on. Hey, just a preview. This is what's coming. And I think OpenAI, Anthropic, all these people have gotten better at telling us, here's what's coming. Here's how to get ready. And I think it's very important to listen to that, because if you don't get it right the first time, I think there are going to be consequences for the first time ever that we haven't really had before.
Right. And I think like you are seeing the fast movers already taking advantage, right? You've probably seen the headline of the Texas school that used AI to improve test scores, or, the one I like even better from the World Bank doing research in Nigeria on how, kids who had AI as a tutor learned as much in 6 weeks as students in the classroom did in 2 years. And so it's amazing because on one hand, it fixes the accessibility problem, right? We all have the same access. It's like the famous line of like everyone from the president to a bum on the street drinks the same Coke. And it's like we all have access to the same AI, right? It doesn't matter if you are Bill Gates or you're a 6th grader in Nigeria. You actually have the same access to the same intelligent tool. But how are we going to integrate that to augment like the educators and administrators we have? I think my perspective, if the school's not doing it, someone can just do it at home or with a tutor or on their own, right? So it's like schools have so many advantages, and I want my kids there to learn the social side of life. I want them to have mentors and social emotional learning support from educators. So it's like they got to get that piece of the technology in there though, because otherwise people are going to start saying, I don't know if that's where I should be or not. So I think one really big change, and I know an article came out just this week on it that I am trying to instill, and I know I saw your video on it, is that AI is not like I work faster tool. It helps you create faster lesson plans and write emails and create policies faster, but really it should make your work as an educator better. So I wonder if you can talk to us a little bit about AI as a teammate and maybe this mindset shift from AI as like a easy button to AI as a think better button.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's also like where people find more joy. The other day, there was something about how, like, there's been a lot lately, I think, in the news, right? Whether it was Bill Gates saying, hey, like in 10 years, like there's going to be not no more, but he said doctors and teachers like aren't going to be as needed as much and things like that. I think in general, we are starting to hear more around jobs. And I think when it comes to AI and jobs and things like that, like why this matters, I think a lot of people think that like these things happen like poof overnight. Like there's an update and now boom, my job is gone. And that's not really what happens. Like what happens like with technology is that over time, the work you do, if it doesn't change and kind of like realign the way you're saying, it deteriorates, right, over time. And I think education is such a great example of this. Like people aren't happy because the job has deteriorated over the years because we haven't created that alignment, and we've had more technology, but we haven't really reimagined the way in which that technology can operate alongside us to really give people back that meaning and fulfillment. So do you want me to pull up these slides that we have?
Please.
Yeah. Okay.
And while you're pointing that up, I think, it just always brings that concept of the Matthew effect, right? Where like those who have get more out of technology than those who don't. And I just think like that's going to be an issue with any technology, but my hope is that AI is a little bit more democratic than maybe previous technology innovations. I'm curious your thoughts on that as you share.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I say, right, like it's a super unforgiving technology. And I think that's why I say people's jobs deteriorate, because while I always use the example, because this just personally fascinates me, the example of like online course creators who are teaching classes, they might not be your credentialed teachers, but they are teaching classes that are helping people generate income. And then you think about your traditional K-12, even community college, higher education professors who are teaching, and you look up the income generated, it's night and day, which tells you that people really, really, really value paying for education, and people will pay for education, and people value a lot of like learning these different skills. But because that reimagination hasn't happened in sort of like traditional spaces, we're not seeing the same kind of outcomes, meaning, fulfillment, life, all that kind of stuff that you are in these two places. So I think I look a lot at like people who build online courses and just like cohorts, retreats, summits, all these types of things, and think, why is that not happening in, education as well? Because those are people that actually have the pedagogical background. Those are usually big pieces that are missing from a lot of these online and these kinds of spaces. So basically the premise of like what we talk about with people and what we help them build and design is, don't just think of this as a tool, because the truth is it's not a tool, right? right? Like I always say, like intelligence isn't really the goal of AI, right? It's agency. And I remember I learned that when I was like, why in the world do they call them AI agents? And I feel like we hear that word all the time now. And I was like, it sounds so CIA-ish. People are already afraid of this technology. Why in the world was it named this? So I started like researching, and it turns out the reason they're called agents is because it comes from the word agency. And I was like, wow, like I can't think of a more shared word between the two fields, which by the way, the
Mm,
two fields, education and AI, have a lot of shared words because in many ways their goals are the same. You each hope to give your group agency, right? Over how to make decisions, how to live a meaning, like how to do all of these different things. And so we now have to be extra specific in what does it mean to have agency as a human? What does it mean to have agency as a machine? Because when both entities have agency, how do you work side by side, right? You had a really good line. You were like using AI as just like something to push a
oh
button.
yeah, like efficiency button versus like better work button, right? Like it's not just about like I can write a faster email. It's like I can actually do more creative, interesting work that I couldn't if I didn't have a teammate, right?
Absolutely. So I think this is a very important, like really easy line to use to frame this. So when you hear people like Bill Gates say, because so many people message me about this, like when you hear people like Bill Gates say those kinds of things about teachers not being needed, he is thinking of the very traditional classroom teacher. That's why he thinks, well, I can take a tutor and I can put it here, and well, I don't need this person anymore. And so it's very important for people to understand that if you don't evolve your role to kind of do what you're saying, how do I work better with AI,
Mm-hmm.
like with this teammate? Yes, you do run the risk that you will be replaced. And we have to be comfortable saying that so that people in this moment, like this is your time to prepare. And you have a long window. You've got another year, year and a half, I think, to really upskill and do that, which is AI has made that easier. So here's how we
Yeah.
work to do it with people. First of all, don't think of this just as another tool, right? Like another app that you're downloading, another website you're going to. No, you need to start thinking of this as a member of your team. Now, we always say when we think about our traditional organizations, right? If you're thinking about just a school, this is like a very simple scale, your kind of hierarchy. You have your superintendent, assistant soup, CTO, HR, then you have your directors, your principals, educators, a bunch of like other people in your organization. Now, the difference is today, you've gotten in like 100 new team members, right? Like these AIs are now in everybody's organizations. The only challenge is they're running wild, right? So one of the things we say is like, we would never take a person and just bring them into an organization, let them run wild, right? No, we have onboarding, we have paperwork we require you to do. We give you a job description. Even if you are, say, a substitute teacher, you have a title, you have a job description, you have paperwork you fill out, there's a procedure you go through when you come in and enter school, even if it's just for like, say, 8 hours or 3 hours or whatever of the day. So we say we should do the same thing with our AI tools. If you're going to
Mm-hmm.
introduce them, you should give them names, job descriptions, and very clear roles on your organizational chart. And you would think that this takes a long time, but honestly, because of AI, we speed through this like this. Like it's not hard to like get people to do that. And what we do is we start building out these visuals for people. Okay, as a leader, if you could hire 3 people tomorrow to help you with things, who would those 3 people be? If you're an educator and you wanted help with something and you could hire, which by the way, a superintendent, a principal, like many of these people, they get to hire assistants, they get to hire people. A teacher is really the only individual, and maybe you could say counselors probably too. I mean, but for this thing, we're just going to focus on like that, is they don't get to hire, right? So this is an amazing concept for you that will take a moment for you to wrap your head around. But the intentionality, I think, is what differentiates. Because somebody could easily say, well, I'm using this AI app and it creates lesson plans for me, quizzes for me. That's my assistant, that's my teammate. But the problem is somebody else has prepackaged and pre-designed and preloaded kind of that teammate for you. We're advocating for because the technology is accessible and in many times cheaper to do it this way than it is to go and just buy an app, deploy it to everybody and be like, okay, thing. Because in this process, it requires people to not just have an app deployed to them, but it requires them to sit down and first reflect on what do I need? What part of my job should I no longer be doing? Not, hey, here's an app that's going to automate all the parts that you don't like doing. And we think what happens is when you just bring in a random application for an AI tool, and by random app, I want to be clarify and say, I'm not talking about ChatGPT, I'm not talking about Claude, I'm not talking about Gemini. I'm talking about your magic schools, your bursts, and all of these other tools. And again, not because we don't like them. They serve a great purpose and they can do great things. But the problem is, somebody could easily say, well, I'm using this AI app and it creates lesson plans for me, quizzes for me. That's my assistant, that's my teammate. But the problem is, somebody else has prepackaged and pre-designed and preloaded kind of that teammate for you. We're advocating for because somebody could easily say, well, I'm using this AI app and it creates lesson plans for me, quizzes for me. That's my assistant, that's my teammate. But the problem is, somebody else has prepackaged and pre-designed and preloaded kind of that teammate for you. We're advocating for because somebody could easily say, well, I'm using this AI app and it creates lesson plans for me, quizzes for me. That's my assistant, that's my teammate. But the problem is, somebody else has prepackaged and pre-designed and preloaded kind of that teammate for you. We're advocating for But one thing they do is they rob you from this first part of the conversation because they've just inserted a solution for you without you pausing to really reflect on why you're integrating this in. So we think building this out is really step one. And what this does is now, once you've set your dreams, you've set your ambitions, you've decided your criteria, what do we do next? We interview. And now, when we are selecting our AI tool, we're not doing it because a vendor made a great case. We're not doing it because we saw some panel where everybody was talking about something. We're doing it because these were our needs and this criteria was fulfilled with this tool. So this is how we make good informed decisions about our technology that we don't regret down the line. And the biggest reason we're trying to do this is I think a lot of people have heard of like fixed and growth mindset, right? And I think you have a lot of people who I think are early adopters in AI that have a growth mindset. They like, okay, how do I learn this? What do I do? How do I do this? Like, but at the end of the day, a person with a growth mindset has limited resources, limited time, and as a result, limited agency, right? A person with fixed mindset, they're like a lost cause. Like this person has no hope, no agency. Person thinks everything's broken. So like in this scenario, and we use literacy because it is definitely a challenge, I think, for a lot of people. But a fixed mindset person is somebody who says things like, kids today have no attention span. They're just on TikTok all day long. They're never going to do anything, right? Like this person has no belief that they can change anything, do anything, whatever. But a growth mindset person says, well, with some encouragement, some practice, if we reimagine how we do things, kids will build this love for learning. So they have hope, right? Which is very important with AI, but they often don't have the help. That a person with an AI mindset comes in with this ambitious dream, like, hey, how do we make reading more engaging and more personalized? People that you talk about, like in Nigeria, have an AI mindset, right? They didn't know how it was going to pan out, but they knew something was possible. And so that ambition is what will make you, I believe, irreplaceable. Because the more advanced these AI tools become, that we have to become more ambitious as people about what we can do. And I think that is a muscle that is dead because it's not how we operate. And so we must
Totally.
revive this muscle and bring this back. So
And
that's
and I
kind of
think
the
that's the gap with AI, which is you still have to ask the question, right? Like you still have to take agency to explore and iterate. And it's like if you're just expecting the easy button, you're going to get the same result as every other school, every other teacher. And your methodology, your viewpoint, like your experience is not imbued in that tool. And so I think what's somewhat I think this is really interesting. The past couple of weeks we saw the Studio Ghibli with ChatGPT. And what was fascinating is that some of that power already existed. You know, you could go to Midjourney and create images, but the difference is you started from nothing. And what I think the last week showed is people are much more likely to take something and improve it rather than start from nothing. It's really scary to say I'm going to build something from scratch. And so I think that's why so many schools haven't gotten to that AI mindset yet, because it is a little bit scarier to say I'm going to take nothing and build rather than here's a picture I already have, just like do something to it, or here's a curriculum I already have, just like remodify it. But it's like if you start from what do we want to teach, how do we want to give our students agency, like that's going to force a little bit earlier, like you said, going back a step to like why are we here. That's hard. It's hard, but I think that's what to succeed with AI, it's not I know how to use this tool or that tool. It's like I'm not afraid to create
yeah.
and potentially fail and try again. It's not a like big risk. It's just personal
No.
risk of like trying.
And this is what, and this is a feature you guys have inside yours, which is like to help with the prompt, right? Like that comes up with
Yeah.
it. The one really, really, really big difference between starting from scratch pre-AI and starting from scratch today is even when you're starting from scratch today, you don't have to do it alone. It
Yeah.
was, we saw the same thing with the iPads. Remember, like there was a reason, like some people bought like all the different like iReady apps and like all these other different ones. And then you had other people who were using things like Notability, Explain Everything, Pages, Keynote. But the difference between the two groups was one was comfortable with like a blank screen app, right? Like that's why we used to call those evergreen apps, right? Because even till this day, you can pull them up and you can use them, right? Whereas these other ones, it's pre-programmed for you. But back then, if you wanted to use and explain everything to create like, oh, I'm going to have my kids make videos, you had to come up with every single thing by yourself. Today, you just need the idea. And I think it was Greg Eisenberg the other day who like just puts out like, I mean, his content is incredible. But he said, we used to say ideas were cheap, execution was like the main thing. He said today it's flipped now. Now ideas are everything because today anyone can execute because you don't have to execute alone anymore. You just go to your AI
Right.
tool and say, hey, this is my idea. And
Yeah.
you know how much I love design thinking, but even that creating the idea, it's not going to happen by magic. It's very important to, and this is the hard part, like we don't have the muscles, right? So we have to rebuild the muscles. But that's why I love design thinking because design thinking will help you build that muscle. It's like your personal trainer for building your idea and your ambition muscle. So that's
Yeah.
sort of like all of
And
that.
it's like, I always tell people, like, there's some studies that have come out that showed, unlike previous technologies, people who are older are actually better at AI. They get more out of it. And I think the reason's clear, which is you have experience. And like, if you don't have the vocabulary to ask for things, you can't get it. Like, if I want to get create an image that looks like Picasso and I don't know Picasso's name and I have to explain it, that's basically impossible. Like, how do you explain a Picasso? Whereas, if you're an expert in art or architecture or literature or history, like, you can say, like, make a map like Napoleon's map going through Europe, and now you have this really cool thing for your students. But if someone doesn't know any of that history, they're not going to be able to ask for it. So I think teachers are perfect for AI because they have this depth of knowledge that they can pull from to create, whereas someone who doesn't have that background isn't going to be as well positioned for it.
Absolutely. And not alongside the knowledge, they also have the instructional practices, right? So like
Yes.
so you're when you're trying to teach your AI tool to do things for you, you understand how you want things outlined. You understand the pedagogical frameworks. Now you might not be using them all on a day-to-day, but you know what they are. And I think, yeah, you're right. This is a natural advantage you have just because of your profession.
Yeah, that's perfect.
I will also say what you brought up there also really highlights, I think, a big friction point for a lot of people. And that is like, well, how do you get kids to learn when they're just going to use AI for everything? And this is another big recommendation we make. And that is that what happens, I think, as well, when you buy one of these tools, like a school AI or a magic school, a lot of times people get it for their students, right? So now it's like, oh, great, all of our students now have this. And I actually think high school, middle, and elementary need completely different AI strategy plans because a high school student has very different needs going into the workforce more immediately, college career, than an elementary or middle school student walking into a world with AGI. It's like my opinion that like putting those little kids on chatbots is just not it. I don't know. And here's the thing, that's just my opinion right now off of one thing. The problem in your organization is if you're not designing metrics to assess what the outcomes are from what you're purchasing, if you don't have experiments in place to be like, okay, what skills are they actually learning and gaining? And you don't have a way of doing that, which I don't think most people are doing at all, you're going to have a really hard time knowing whether you're on track to those outcomes, which brings us back to the beginning. If that is like, what are you even trying to do? Right.
Yeah.
So, with a lot of these things, I think you just see a lot of like perpetuating of the status quo. And I think it's going to make a lot of people in a year from now angry about these tools, angry about AI. They're going to have a huge skill gap because, to your point, with the blank slate and their fear, people will say it right. You hear this all the time. Like with ChatGPT, I have to think, right? With these tools, we just get this done. I don't have to think. We pause people when we hear that. Okay, let's unpack that. And then how do we build that thinking skill? Because you absolutely can, and you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, should we build one together? Anything else you want to hit before
Yeah,
we kind of
absolutely. I
get in
think the
here?
only other thing I wanna hit is, like,
Yeah,
we have
please.
research to back this up, right? Like, so we've
Yeah,
been saying
totally.
this for, like, the last, like, year and a half. This has been, like, AI is a teammate, AI is a teammate. It's, like, my signature keynote, and last week or something, we had the first kind of, like, study, and I think there's a lot more of them coming out now, and this is, again, I would just go back to not because one person knows something more than the other, but because the AI companies have been telling us this. So if you've been following them, you know this is the language they've been using, but research will always have a delay factor. So you have to be able to like know how to filter through different knowledge sources today. So, anyways, I think the biggest takeaways he at Harvard and Wharton, like I feel like a lot of people follow Ethan Malik. I think he was one of the main people on the study. Basically, look at does having an AI on your team, what are the outcomes? And overall, what they found was when you think of AI as a teammate and it's integrated in strategically, it increases performance, provides expertise. But most important part that they said was unexpected, it makes people happier. It reduces friction, reduces burnout, reduces a lot of the tension that we have in work. And so I just want to lay out the study for you because this is exactly what we're going to show you now in this next example. They had 4 different groups. They did an individual with no AI and a team with no AI. So think the world pre-ChatGPT, then the world after ChatGPT, an individual with AI and a team with AI. And what they basically found was that like individuals with AI outperformed teams without AI. So this is again really important to think about when you think about that teacher who is working alone or a principal working on their own. A human and an AI was the equivalent to two humans. But the best results came from human teams using AI together. So team with AI had much better outcomes all around. And so just to show you some of the things, this one I thought was really important at a time when people think that burnout and lack of like unwellness and all these things are like things, conversations. Teams that used AI felt more socially connected to each other. And it was because a lot of the friction of like meetings and waiting for somebody else to tell you their knowledge thing, right? Work is cross functional. We have different things working together. And so instead of having to wait for that person to bring their expertise in, the AI was able to fill in a lot of these gaps, made alignment easier, made projects run faster, and just made people happier all around. And so I really want to emphasize this cross-functional piece because cross-functional in the workplace is interdisciplinary learning in like our schools. And that really was the biggest sort of like aha moment, I think, from this whole thing, how teams used it. Did you have norms? Did you have guidance? Did you have values for how you were going to trust the information that was coming in? How did you onboard this teammate? So that whole thing that we talked about earlier was one of the biggest findings, that people who do that end up seeing much, much better results. So let's show people like what
I
it's
love
like.
it. Another Ethan Mollick term is like bring AI in the room. It's like I always say AI is the second best option. So if you have a curriculum designer sitting next to you, like use them, right? And you have a great team. But most of us don't have that curriculum designer just hanging out, or a lawyer or a designer or a data analyst. So it's like AI is the second best option. And often the second best option is what's available, which is I don't have time to hire a lawyer or money, right? So let's just use the person that we have next to us, which is AI.
Absolutely. But even when we do have somebody next to us, I think AI still has like a really important role.
Oh,
Like
totally.
there's a really great one where there was a principal and they had a day-long workshop on PBL for her teachers. Okay. And she was telling me how like only 10 to 20% of the teachers had been around when like this initiative started. Everybody was new. So what she did was we worked together and we built her a little PBL chatbot trained on the materials and resources that teachers are going to be getting. So in the workshop, instead of just sitting and listening about this, they were actually able to like build out units while they were there. That's unheard of. You go to workshops, you go to these things, and you have to, again, go home and do the work yourself.
Yeah.
With AI can be there to start doing that work for you if you have onboarded and introduced it as a proper member of your team. So I think for this scenario, you're going to start, let's set the scene, because the one thing I think everybody has is some type of PLC time, some type of collaboration time. And that to me is your first entry point. You don't need a new workshop. You don't need to new something. You need to find the time where you are already meeting, which is PLC or collaboration time, to be like
Mm-hmm.
pretending like me and Scott are in one of those right now, and what we would build if we were sitting there doing that.
That's amazing. Yeah, well, let's go through a few examples. We'll use Chipp as an example. So Chipp is an easy way to build AI agents. A lot of what you'll see here, you could do with ChatGPT or Copilot, but the difference with Chipp is you can do it for other people, right? So you can train it and then give it to everyone on your team. And so even if they don't like AI, they can use AI. I've spent most of my career, I think, like helping democratize technology. And this is sort of a way to do that. So I think you can see my screen here. So Chipp is just with two P's, CHIPP.ai, and you can just click get started. It's free. One of the best places to get started, like we said, it's easy to iterate. And we do have, over 200 different templates. So you can look up things like AI tutor, for example, and like download the AI tutor, right? Or you can look up the policy and procedure, and you could actually get this pre-built agent and then modify it. So for example, if I go up here and duplicate the policy and procedures, so if we're trying to create a new policy for our school, this will just give us kind of the backbone or the template. And then like we talked about, it's so important to bring your own knowledge into this, your own documents. And so that's something that you can really easily do with Chipp. So on the left-hand side is how we train it. So there's two ways to train an AI tool, which is you tell it what to do or you show it what to do. So to tell it what to do, we're going to use a prompt, right? So prompt is the way you talk to an AI. So in this case, you're a writer, your role is to draft policies, and then it's going to do these steps. And so as a school, I would go in here now and make my own steps, right? So maybe I don't need it to require about legal. Maybe I need it to ask about what grade it's in, or maybe I need to do something else. But these are all the instructions that we could use. So that's how you tell it what to do. The other option is we just show it what to do. So like just upload a document of a previous policy and say, make a policy like this about screen use or about after school activities. Or maybe you upload a YouTube video and that YouTube video has information about it. So that's a really easy way to train it. And then on the right is what you and your school will see. So if I click on share, I can grab the link and copy that. And then I can go over and I'm going to now see my AI chat that everyone on my team can use. And I can either embed it in a website or I can just start chatting with it here. And it's going to go through those instructions that I just gave it. So if our team always wants it to behave a certain way, we can just tell it how to do it. So a really great example of this in the education side, I like showing this tutor from NIU, so Northern Illinois University, because one of the problems with AI is it always gives you an answer. So it's not a very good tutor because it just tells you the answer. And so one of the things you can do is say things like, don't give the answer, right? Use the Socratic method, force students to think through multiple times before giving an answer. And so that's where we can bring that methodology and that experience in. And then when they're asking questions, like I have a calculus question, it's trained on their textbook. These are all the chapters of their textbook. And if I have a calculus question, it'll start talking to me here. But one of the reasons why NIU is excited is that they have a large majority minority school. So a lot of the students don't have English as a first language. And so they don't have the tutor resources for those students in other languages. So I might tell it my name, but I might say something, like, can you speak Spanish? And it'll just immediately switch, right? And so you can think about the power of AI here is that it can talk in any language at any time to anyone and can be a thought partner for everyone. So those are two really quick examples. So I think a great way to get started is you can either go to Chipp and build one from scratch, or probably the easy way to get started is go to that marketplace and search for something, right? Just search for what you're trying to do and use that template to build your own. And I think having that power to use your knowledge and expertise and put it into action is really powerful. So what I would love to do, Sabba, is to talk to you regularly, because I know you have a lot more ideas that we need to share. And so let's plan on coming back and getting into the weeds on some of the best ways schools use AI. So not just how you should be thinking about it, but maybe how you can use it to take action. Does that sound like a plan? Other things you maybe have in mind?
Totally sounds like a plan. I want to just be able to, because I know anytime someone listens to this, their first question is data privacy security. So tell us about that with Chipp, because it's one of the reasons why I really like it as a recommendation.
Perfect. Yeah. So one thing that makes Chipp unique is ease and privacy. So really easy to use, as you saw, like can build it in seconds. But with privacy, Chipp can be used on your own infrastructure. So you can either run Chipp in your own cloud and your IT team manages it, or you can run it in a private cloud that Chipp creates for you, and we take care of the uptime and make sure everything works. So what that means is, if you go to ChatGPT or you have your students go to ChatGPT, every time they upload a file, that file is being stored on OpenAI's database, and anything they say in the chat is going to be shared as well. With Chipp, you can make sure that all of that stays in your own infrastructure. And we're even building out alert systems, right? So if students are talking about certain topics, teachers can be alerted. So you can see the conversations if you want to turn that on as a teacher or administrator or tutor, or you can shut that off if you want to keep it anonymous. But that allows you to comply with HIPAA requirements and also be able to tell parents, like, we're not forcing our student to give data to a large tech company. So I think it's really important. And it's, like you said, the most common question we get, which is why we wanted to build that feature out.
I love that. So maybe we'll just say that, like, if you're going to join us next time, like Scott showed, like you showed, like the building of something, the doing of something, that we recommend doing it in a team. Like, just like the research says, that teams who do this with AI are way more successful. So if you and a friend, or you want to grab a friend and bring them next time and be like, okay, how could we do this? That's what we will do together.
I love that. Well, thanks for taking time, Sabba. You have so much knowledge. We just have to break it into pieces so we can digest it, because it comes out so fast and furious. I can't wait to build with you soon. And we hope everyone will subscribe on YouTube, follow Sabba on LinkedIn. We'll share this all the places so you'll find it. And we'll look forward to learning more about how to use AI in education soon.